Welcome back to the Fuel Your Legacy podcast. Each week, we expose the faulty foundational mindsets of the past and rebuild a newer, stronger foundation essential in creating your meaningful legacy. We've got a lot of work to do, so let's get started. As much as you like this podcast, I'm certain that you're going to love the book that I just released on Amazon, Fuel Your Legacy, The 9 Pillars to Build a Meaningful Legacy. I wrote this to share with you the experiences that I had while I was identifying my identity, how I began to create my meaningful legacy, and how you can create yours. You're going to find this book on Kindle, Amazon, and as always on my website, samknickerbocker.com. Welcome back to the Fuel Your Legacy show. And today we have another incredible guest. Super grateful that LeSean Smith was able to hop on and take time out of his life to share this wonderful information with you. Now, I've interviewed lots of different people from all different backgrounds. And one of the things that I haven't done a lot of is interviewed somebody that it feels like is on the software developer space. It's not something generally that I interview a lot of people for. So I'm excited about this conversation to kind of see how you think and kind of what's the methodical way that you go through things. But LeSean is a business creator and software developer who's helped people predictively navigate their entrepreneurial journey. So although he's on the developer side, he also, if you can see the back of his video, I'm assuming that's not a fake background. Those are real books.
No, those are
behind
real.
you know? And so here's the thing. Somebody who's read that much and studied that much to become who they are, there's tons of value there. So if you're on Facebook watching this right now and you want to ask a comment or you're listening to the conversation, hey, why didn't Sam ask this question? Just go ahead, drop it in the comments and I'll ask the question. If you like the answer, you can maybe ask another one. If you don't like the answer, you probably needed the answer. And that's just how life goes. So go for it, LeSean. Tell us a little bit about you, your background. How did you get into, I didn't even read off the list of companies you've worked with and helped. How did you get to where you are right now? And why are you so passionate about what you're doing moving forward?
Yeah, well, first off, great to hang out. Good to be here. I would say if we go way back to my journey, it's mostly been what I call tasting the buffet. And I really like to find something I get energized by, and I don't place a ton of value in kind of the invested time in that particular stop, that skill, that company. If I see something new that is interesting, I kind of gravitate. And so as a result, I've had a pretty wide career from, as an individual contributor, software developer, UX designer, product management. These are all roles pretty common in software companies.
Just a second.
Yeah, no worries.
There's something, my computer just started talking to itself.
Yeah, no worries.
How do I do that?
It just started talking to itself.
Mute it maybe? How's that? Can you hear me good?
Yes.
Okay, good. Yeah, I don't want it talking to itself. Go for it. Sorry about that.
No problem. So, yeah, if we go way back, one of the things that I have, I think, been fortunate to have is a bunch of different experiences. And so as an individual contributor, I've worked in a number of the different types of roles at a software company, from programmer to designer to product manager. And really, these are just different roles that contribute. The same way if you're working on a film, you'd have various different roles. And I think when you are working in any industry, when you have the opportunity to work in some of the different disciplines, it really gives you a perspective on how those industries are run. But the more meaningful part about that whole journey has been when I was working in corporate in big software companies. I would work on products that failed. Some of them failed miserably with tons of investment. And then sometimes, there would be products that we would ship that didn't get a ton of investment, small team, and they'd be wildly successful. And I've just been on this mission for years to say, like, what is really the common element to make, some of these seemingly disconnected types of companies or products a success. And where I've really landed on is, two things. One, being customer focused, and two, having a very tight process focus on how you develop your customer. And there's all sorts of frameworks and books around this. One of the most popular is the Lean Startup. But, at the core, it's about how do I iterate my way to business success instead of, kind of hiding in the corner and not telling anyone and trying to build the perfect thing and then popping up one day and say, who wants to buy this? And so many times as, I started coaching and mentoring folks over the years, I would see folks who would start with the product or the service and then go hunt for the customer. And when we invert that, I think that's really the magic. And so, what I do today is invest in largely software companies that help people automate the customer discovery process. And customer discovery is one component of the customer development framework. And if we really take the short version of that, and maybe it's helpful to walk through what is customer development, it has 4 buckets. The first is customer discovery. This is when you figure out, are you solving the right problem? Do you have the right solution? And then what's your go-to-market or your funnel to go and actually acquire customers for that solution? So that's customer discovery, pillar 1. Number 2 is customer validation. This is where you hear words like product market fit. Do you have so much demand for your product that you can't scale? You need to hire more people. You need to raise more capital. Do you have clarity on your business model? Do you have a really clear sales and marketing roadmap? So that's pillar 2. And then 3 is customer creation. This is when you've kind of figured out how to do it, in an efficient way, and now you're trying to scale your execution. And then finally, pillar 4 is company building. And this is where you are scaling the actual organization, your talent, and all the pieces that turns, a small ragtag group of maybe 4 or 5 people into, a growing and scaling company. And so across the board, what I found was, working in software, this process, when done right, is very regimented. And I was like, oh, hold on. You can apply this to all sorts of industries. And that really is the magic and the thesis of what I do, is to figure out how can I take the principles of kind of rapid iteration and apply those to different industries. And so far, it's not always a one-on-one, but I've never met an industry or problem set that can't be improved by starting with the customer and really focusing on rapid iteration to solving their problem.
I love that. And I'm going to ask tons of questions here because I'm fascinated about this new framework that I'm not necessarily. It's a funny thing with truth. When you hear truth, you're like, oh, okay, I recognize that. I've heard that a different way, but changing the framework of how you hear that changes a lot of things, right? So I actually just recently listened to a podcast where they were saying basically the difference between a self-employed individual and an entrepreneur is when you ask them what they do they tell you what they do as far as the description? Are they describing the job function or the results that they're getting people? Or do they say, I'm a business owner and my business does X? Right? Because those are 2 different things. Right, you're an entrepreneur. 100%. You don't identify as, even though you may be the plumber. You may be the plumber who's actually changing the pipes and fixing stuff. But are you a plumber or do you own a plumbing company?
Right. Exactly.
And how you view that transfers into these conversations of a customer, because there's 2 sides of a customer. And this is another thing that I want to get into. So I'm just prefacing here so we are on the same page. There's the customer that is the purchaser of your product, which is the end outcome, which is the money generating side as far as where new revenues come in. But just because new revenues come in, that's not actually the money generating side. The money generating side is the customer who is your employee or the person that bought into your vision. They're a non-compensated person really for what they're buying, but they have to buy into your vision. So you have 2 types of customers, the people who are the customer of your vision and helping you enact that vision. And then you have the customer who's actually paying you the money for the enaction of that vision. And so I want to split this into 2 conversations here so we can drive depth on one and then flip to the other, or I don't know if it'd be best to cover both at the same time. But let's talk about these 4 pillars again. So I think I missed one. I've got customer discovery. What was the second one?
Customer validation.
Validation. Okay. So in the customer discovery, so this is something that in the entrepreneur world we hear all the time, that you shouldn't and again, you've got all these books behind you. I don't know how many of them address this specifically, but a lot probably. You shouldn't go find a problem that you think is a problem and then go try and bring it to market, because that often may not be the problem that other people are facing. The better solution is the more people that you solve their problems, the more money you make, right? That's like Zig Ziglar 101. So it's like, okay, well then how do I go find a problem, a big problem that other people have that I can solve, right? So
exactly.
You almost reverse engineer it, but everybody talks about it. Few people do it. Why do people not follow that advice? It's been talked about so much. Endless books are written about it. Why are people still struggling with wrapping their mind around finding somebody else's problem, solving somebody else's problem, rather than trying to force their problem to be the problem that everybody else has?
So I'll give you 3 things, not in order, that I've seen fairly frequently across entrepreneurs that I believe are contributing to this. Number 1, there are folks who have fallen in love with the idea of their brands. Like in their mind, they've been swimming in the name of their company or the problem they're solving, or maybe they've, kind of shared with their friends and family, I'm starting this new business, and they don't want to break it. Right. And it's kind of funny because in our brains, we might think our next company has the same, kind of brand equity as Nike, but it just doesn't. Like, it's just only in our head. And so I've seen fear where people don't want to experiment and let it grow into something else, because they've kind of already cemented what this thing should be in their head. And you just have to let it flow and let it become something else. And, calling back to some of the products I've worked on in the past, some of the most successful look very different from the narrative or the business plan or the pitch deck that we initially wrote. By the time it actually was successful, people never knew what that other version was. But had we not let go of that initial concept, we've never gotten anywhere. So that's, I think, thing number 1. Thing number 2, decision making is hard. And for a lot of folks, they get to a fork in the road that says, all right, one of these, common tactics you'll hear people use is, before you go build a product, just go put up a landing page, if it's something that's going to be sold digitally, and go figure out how you can drive demand to that. And then have some analytics and see how many people show up, see what the conversion is to your, book a meeting or pre-order the product or whatever your call to action is. And then through that funnel, figure out, do people actually want what you're selling? And then sometimes it's like, well, maybe they want it, but you got to change your marketing copy or what have you. These are all things that are very cheap in time to fix. And so those are the activities we know to go do. But when you're faced with the decision, do I continue experimenting with this or do I pivot to a different idea? I see a lot of kind of decision paralysis. And so the more I think folks can kind of set real targets on, if this is true, I'm going to do X, and they can kind of remove the emotion from the decision-making process, I think the better folks, are. So that's number 2. And then number 3, it is just really challenging, I think, for all of us to bring the same rigor to our entrepreneur venture that we might have when we're working as employees. I know for me, when I first started as an entrepreneur, it was so liberating because I could do anything. But then that was also my Achilles heel. I could do anything. And so through the day, I was doing all these randomized things and I wasn't focused. I didn't have that day-to-day consistency. And that execution consistency is so critical. And I see it so many times, I'll mentor or coach someone and we talk about their idea, and it's not necessarily they're letting the customer evolve it. They're evolving it. And I'm like, you're never going to get to where you want to go if you don't first set that destination and then have a consistent kind of work back on how you get there. So, I'm sure there are other contributors to this issue, but those are 3 that I've seen quite frequently.
Yeah. And I love how, one, you laid them out easily, but I think they all kind of, at least when I'm hearing you describe them, they all fall under the same thing. And that is basically ego. You think that and the reason I'm bringing it up this way, and I mean, I did not necessarily bring it up this way, but that's where I see it as. I've fallen into the trap before. I think most business owners have fallen into this trap of wanting what they want more than they want to keep doing what they're doing because they think that's what they want, but they are scared to ask themselves a real question. And being that we're on a podcast trying to help people identify great questions, I think this is a great question. What do you really want out of your business? What do you really want out of your life? make a list of what you really want. Now, if you want recognition, you want determination, you want to be able to say, I stuck with it till the end, whether it was successful or not, maybe you're on the right course right now, but maybe that's not what you really want. Maybe you want peace. Maybe you want impact. Maybe you want more money. Maybe you want something else. And you're making decisions based off of your ego of being right rather than getting what you want. And that's a big thing, especially, I mean, I think one of the best examples of this conversation, and it's funny that you're from the software developing space, but Elon Musk, if you go back to when he first started, before he started PayPal, he started X, and it didn't turn into what he thought it was going to turn into. Turned into a multi-billion-dollar company. He sold it. And then the iterations of what he's done since have just been iteration after iteration, really fulfilling market demand. So what's he doing? He buys this company. He's like, I don't know why I even need this company. I don't really need it, but I guess I'm going to get it because of actions that he took. So then what's he going to do? Well, he's going to go back and start on his iteration that he started when he started his career. When he was like 20 years old, he had this idea of X. So he's like, fine, now I have the money, I have the resources. He's going to go back at X. Now, maybe he completes or creates what he wanted to create back then. Maybe it's a completely different iteration, but it might turn into another multi-billion-dollar company, which he's happy about because he's happy about creating an impact above making his decision, like making his original idea right. And I think that that's a principle that we can all apply to our lives, is that growth is about iterating your way through life as fast as possible and recognizing that's not serving my ultimate outcome. So what's the ultimate outcome that I want? And how do I drive the ultimate outcome and stop focusing on the little things along the way that are not as crucially important?
Yeah. And you hit something I think folks would benefit. I mean, even myself, I've had to push myself on when we say, kind of move quickly, we need to be more precise, I think, sometimes, because, I've talked to folks who they understand conceptually you need to have a long-term vision and you need to, at the same time, be executing quickly. Like both of those things need to be true. But like, what does moving fast mean, right? And if you are coming from the corporate world or maybe some other type of organization, what, might take, let's say, months or weeks at a big company, maybe you're like, all right, I can do this in 10 days. But practically, your competition is, at that scale, moving in hours, right? And so I don't think folks always internalize how fast you need to move. And so it's one of the kind of key pieces that I look at when I'm investing in folks outside of my company. I do some angel investments. And when I see folks who move extremely fast, right? We have a conversation later that day. They've sent me the document and they've taken the action. It's like that extreme bias for action. I'm like, all right, these folks, if they can be consistent with that type of behavior, they're going to find their way to the right solution. But folks who are moving as if they're employees at a big company, they'll likely run out of resources, emotional wherewithal, or some other resource for them to actually stay alive long enough in their business to find success.
Yeah. And that's another thing that I think is fascinating is sometimes you're doing the right actions, but you do just need more time doing it. Right. Yeah. So sometimes people will bounce off their pathway before they get the result. And this is something Ed Mylett talks about a lot, is the idea of compound pounding, right? So yeah, in a piñata, the first hit didn't do anything. That doesn't mean you didn't hit it right. It just means you need to hit it again and again and again and again and again until you get the result. But it's not stop hitting it because it didn't come out the first time.
Yes.
So there's this balancing act. And I think having advisors is the most advantageous way to move through that. And the advisors could be your customers, right? Could be the discovery or the development of, okay, let's find a problem that's out there. Let's solve the problem. But then how do we help the client understand that we're solving the problem?
Yeah,
right?
100%.
Validate that we actually got our guess right about what the problem is. So what are some methods that you've used to validate? You've done the customer discovery. You think you have a big enough problem to solve. You're kind of in that process. You think you know what the cost of acquisition is going to be to get that specific client. How do you go validate your system fast before it gets too late in the process and you're doing something that's not important?
Well, I think the first piece is acknowledging, kind of the dynamics of your industry. One of the benefits of making digital products or software is there's no physical thing to move around. There's very little CapEx. And so you naturally, by the shape of the business, you can move more quickly. And so in the old term of one of the companies I worked with before, the concept of a two-way doors, there's a lot of two-way doors in software, meaning that you can go in this door and come back out. Like the tax is very low versus a one-way door that once I go through this door, the cost to go back around is extremely expensive. And so if you are in, consumer packaged goods, or you're in energy, or, certain businesses that have like really high costs of either starting or operational, those are going to be trickier to navigate and move quickly because you may be capital constrained, or there might be a compliance or regulatory reason. So I call those out as caveats. But with that asterisk aside, I think the number one piece is really defining a process for experimentation. And, a lot of times when, I thought I was experimenting early in my career, what I found over time as I got into organizations that did it really well, I was like, okay, I don't really have a process. So for instance, one of the tools that I do is we have a weekly meeting that is proposed experiments. There is a format. It looks, pseudo-scientific. I hypothesize, or we hypothesize X. And we then kind of walk through, and I'm typically in these meetings reviewing someone's experiment that they've written that says, here's what we want to go do. And I'm there as the quality control check to figure out if they should actually go and execute that. And that experiment will say, we hypothesize that X. And then what they're trying to go and do is typically, and I think this is the magic, they're trying to disprove something we already believe. Right. So instead of trying to find ways to validate what we already want to be true, we're actually saying, like, we believe this is true. We're going to run this experiment to try to disprove it. And it really helps us be dialectic and challenge the way we think when we're trying to talk ourselves out of it. It also sets an organizational tone that's like, it's okay to fail. It's okay to be wrong. If you're always trying to do confirmation bias in your experiments, it's really tricky to kind of stay focused. And so this, simple process of having weekly or bi-monthly experiments that you run, that you collect real data, and you say, if the value of this experiment is X, we're going to do behavior A. If the value or the output of this experiment is Y, we are going to take action B. And you write those, all down in a very dispassionate, clear way. And then that way, when you actually get to the results, no one's kind of, creating this anxiety or anxious feeling about, oh my goodness, we got to shut down this feature. We got to shut down this product. Sometimes you got to shut down the company. And so through that lens, I think that's how you kind of give organizational permission. And even if you're a solopreneur working, by yourself, you can still take this same rule book and say, I am going to hold myself accountable by having a series of experiments that are not going to let me cheat and just try to let momentum take me one direction that hasn't been validated.
Yeah, I think that's huge. I'm going to share a funny story about this concept because, again, I want to draw this podcast into multiple areas. And your mind is like so technical. I love it. How systematic you are through everything. But there's lovers out there who are like, well, what does that have to do with my life? I'm not going to ever write code. I'm not going to do everything. So I'm going to share a perspective of how this might apply to you. And you might think that's horrible. That's way too pragmatic. Well, maybe it is, maybe it's not. I don't know. But I like it and it worked for me. So when I was dating, my first, I shouldn't say my first date, but when I was dating, I had an outcome that I was looking for. I'd done a bunch of research as far as marriage relationships. I had done a bunch of research as far as what causes affairs, what causes divorce, what types of divorce, how, like all the different types of things, how do addictions, and I use addictions with scare quotes because a lot more people are addicted to things than they think they are. And a lot of things that people are considered addicted to are not actually addictions. They're just bad habits. And so we have to be clear about the kind of this nuance, but I had done a lot of research. And so when I went into dating, a lot of people say, well, you kind of did this silly, Sam, because I went on over dates with over 100 different girls, spent probably $70,000 over a course of 8 months, like aggressively looking for a life partner, not just passively, like very clear about my intentions. So how does this relate to this conversation? Well, as a result of that, I decided what are things that get in the way for Sam to have a meaningful relationship and actually dig deeper into somebody's soul. Well, I really like physical touch, pretty much everything physical. I love it. So I put a parameter on myself and said, look, I'm going to refuse to have physical touch with these females until different stages in a relationship. I'm curtailing my ability. And I was very clear on the first date. We'd get in the car and say, hey, just so we're clear here, these are my boundaries. And it's like, well, why would you do that on the first date? They don't even know you. Well, because I'm approaching this from a very outcome-oriented process. I wanted a specific type of person to marry. And so I went through that. And then I found out that I experimented with, because I thought it was a funny factor to tell people. I would tell girls that I like to shave my legs. And it didn't matter if I told them that on the first date, or if I told them that on the fourth date, or if I told them that after I was already dating them. They've been dating. And guys, I didn't shave my legs at any point in time. But I would tell them that I like to. And it was fascinating to see most, in my experience, most girls within 2 weeks of hearing that I like to shave my legs, they would ghost me. And it's like these little things that really have nothing to do with building software or anything. But the point is, are you clear about what you actually want out of a spouse? And this isn't some checklist where you're going to get everything perfect, right? Just as you mentioned, there's iterations. Yeah. So this is another funny thing that's, again, personal, humorous, maybe a little crass, but it is what it is. At that point of dating, I thought that I wanted a certain bra size and type of butt on a woman, right? So you may have heard this story before if you've listened to me, but I thought that's what I wanted. Well, the woman that I ended up marrying, my wife now, Charlie, she's the opposite of that, completely opposite. And on our first date, she asked me, hey, what type of guy are you? Like, well, and at that time I said, well, I really am I described what features I liked. And I said, hey, clearly that's not you, but it's a good thing that physical attraction is only about 30% of this equation as far as whether we're going to end up together or not. Because I understood this is the importance level. Yes, I want to be able to have children with you, but no, I understand that you're going to change. Your body's going to change, especially having children. That's going to change. Like if I'm so obsessed with looks, then I'm going to miss out on great personalities. And I already know that looks are going to change. That's part of life. And so if I already know that looks are going to change, then why would I attach my lifelong decision of a marriage on something that I know is going to change and that I have no control over?
Yeah, I mean, what I love about that whole flow is it's tying multiple things that we're talking about. I think number one, you have to set your destination. And so whether it's something very technical or it's entrepreneurial or it's a personal goal, you have to set your destination. And I have 3 questions that I like to ask aspiring entrepreneurs and folks who are just getting started. Number 1, who are you? Number 2, what is your destination? And then, i.e., what do you want? And then 3, what are you willing to spend to get it? And spend is time, it's emotional resources, it's social capital. It's not just money. And I find when we're honest with ourselves, many times we want success without the discomfort. We want the, acceptance of folks without the communication. And so kind of using tactics or, different types of toolkits to kind of get to that, I think are interesting. So your example of like telling someone that, hey, when I tell, a woman that, I like to shave my legs, they ghost me. You've just created a rubric or a little, kind of heuristic that will help you kind of pare down the pool to get to who you actually want to spend the time with. And all of this, I think can accrue back to, you're talking about ego and also just, I don't know if this is an addiction or a bad habit or something else, but, definitely in Western countries, we tend to overvalue convenience. And so when something's easy, we're kind of drawn to it. And so, there's a saying you may have heard, let's say, you go to a coffee shop or maybe a concert and you see somebody playing the guitar and it's like, oh my goodness, I wish I could play like that. And what people are really saying is, I wish I could play like that without doing any work. Because, unless you have like something, abnormal with your hands, it's pretty easy to get, solid on a guitar very quickly. 40, 80 hours of deep practice, you will be better than most people. And yes, you won't be, Eric Clapton or Jimi Hendrix, but, this idea that you can, you could have that if you want it. And so when I hear folks talk about entrepreneurial success or how to have the best fitness, how to, anything that you want to kind of prioritize in your life, likely it's going to come with you getting comfortable being uncomfortable, because we're exercising places where we have gaps. And when we build those skills, we build new relationships, we invest in these things, we move toward that destination. But, one of the things I think is, just not practical. Sometimes we hear this on social and online, is that there's an easy way or a shortcut to winning. And typically there's not. And so you should pick a destination that you deeply want to win, because the path there will probably be uncomfortable.
Yeah, not just probably, undoubtedly will be uncomfortable. Like there's no chance, I think, that growth is not uncomfortable. And that's even if you love where you're going. You think that you can get there as who you are, but if you were able to get there as who you are, you'd already be there. So the destination requires change, requires growth. So I'm going to ask some questions here. We're going to sign off on Facebook. Thanks for watching. If you do have questions, stay tuned for the next one. Put it on reminder so that you'll be alerted next time I go live. Just so you're aware, that's going to be in about 30 minutes. So 20 minutes, actually. So anyways, we're going to sign off there, and then we're going to ask these final questions. But some of the questions we're going to be going over, so why you're going to want to go actually listen to the podcast, is how do you transfer the experience in your corporate job into being an entrepreneur? So that's number one. Number two, how do you take each department and view your skill in and of itself? Just like we talked about being a self-employed versus an entrepreneur, you can be an entrepreneur inside of somebody else's company. So we're going to talk about that as well. But we're going to sign off and hope you have a wonderful day. Okay, so I do want to call back to this really quick. You spent your career working inside of somebody else's company for the most part. Right. That's how you rose in your prominence there. Why is it that most people don't view each job or department head or whatever as its own company? Because once your company gets big enough, and I say that really every company should start this way, and E-Myth by Michael Gerber kind of talks about this, but a lot of people, they start working for somebody and they think, oh, that's a separate deal. I'm part of somebody else's company. But you actually have a lot of latitude inside of that company to get investment and to develop, and they just care about the outcome, which is money in their pockets most of the time. They don't really care as much about the impact. They care about what's going to bring in new revenue. So you do have some latitude there. I'm curious if you can talk about that nuance. How do you manage up and down to create your own entrepreneurial mindset inside of a corporate world?
Well, first off, we should acknowledge the concept of entrepreneurship, which is what you're kind of hitting on. And that's been the bulk of my corporate career. And what I love about entrepreneurship, and for folks not familiar with the term, it's the concept of entrepreneurship within an existing organization. And what I love about that is it speaks to my desire to go start new things, kind of 0 to 1, the Peter Thiel concept. But also it leans into this blue ocean where many folks who are in these large companies who don't want to waste their political capital, they don't want to be seen as a failure, they won't raise their hand to go run these businesses. And so it's one of the fastest ways to accelerate your career. And, for me, if you talk to me, early in my career, I didn't even know I could make, money writing software. It's just something I did as a child, and I didn't know that was actually a career path. So I just got lucky that the thing I like to do as a hobby turned out to be a massive trend, and industry. But when you have these spaces that you can fail in, because entrepreneurship, you can fail. I think the gap is making sure you understand that failure is actually rewarded. Now, maybe you won't work at that company, but now you have experience doing that. And then the next big company is ready to hire you to go take on their challenge. And, before I get to what do we take to entrepreneurship, for folks who are interested in that, you want to kind of bet on the right horse. Warren Buffett has this great story where he says, he went to school with this guy who was as smarter than him, and he just went to the wrong industry. And Warren Buffett just picked the industry that was going to be more valuable. And for me, I had no path on what financially I would do. But by the time I left big tech, these are the big technology companies. I remember the first year as a tech executive, I made over $1 million in income, and I was like, this is crazy. Like, a job is going to pay me more than $1 million a year. Like, it's just bananas. Now, taxes and other things are reasons why you're like, wait, hold on. These are a lot of taxes to be an employee, but that's what's possible as an employee doing entrepreneurship in, the right industry. Now, all those things have to line up and be true, right? You have to be driven. You have to take on that risk. You have to be betting on an industry that is actually growing, has the blue ocean. But all those things are true. Now, why then go to entrepreneurship? For me, it's twofold. I have a personal constitution. It's 6 words, 3 sentences. Know thyself, make things, stay free. And I love the empowerment that I get as an entrepreneur. Number 2, you create more leverage when you are the owner of the business. And so, it's not all about money, but I don't think we should devalue ourselves. And anytime someone's going to pay you X, let's say you make $60,000 in your job, you should in your mind think, I'm worth 3, 4, 10 times that, because otherwise, why would they hire you? And so I really am kind of built into this idea that, you can create the most leverage as an entrepreneur. And then finally, there is a personality trait that we have to be honest with ourselves. Coming back to the mindset and psychology, there's a framework that says, some people like to climb mountains. Some people like to protect the mountain, and some people like to find new mountains. And I'm in the latter group. I know that's who I am. I think we all need to ask ourselves, what do we actually want to, kind of do? And it's not just, do I want to work or not? Do I want to work on a mature product, a brand new product, a new industry, a defined industry? And some of these things are going to shape the opportunities by the nature of their maturity.
So how did you discover that about yourself, as far as who you are, what you like? What questions did you ask yourself that led you to discovering that? Because again, a large part of this podcast is help people discover who they are. What makes them tick? Because you might tick best inside of a company. Yeah. You might tick best as an entrepreneur. You might tick best as an employee. You might tick best as the leader of a public company. You might tick best as just being a stay-at-home parent. Like, there's nothing wrong with any one of these. The question is, what's going to help you accomplish your end goal? And sometimes you have to choose the end goal over a goal that's like 2 or 3 before the end goal that you really like, but doesn't pay you. So,
right. Yeah. And that's okay, right? You just do that with intentionality.
Yeah. So what are some of the questions that you ask yourself to help you determine, know thyself? I forget the middle one, but then
make things and stay free. Yeah. I mean, I believe we all should have some type of personal constitution that is, each one of our kind of personal version or customized version of that length of words, like 6 to 8 words, I think is about right. Because you need to remember it. It's a decision rubric as you move through the day. And so I think that's really critical to have it short. But I think for me, it's hyper simple. One of the things I do pretty religiously is something called calendar logging. And it's where you treat your calendar as a diary. And so I'm not super focused on like squeezing every bit of productivity out of my day. However, I log, and I've been doing this, for a very long time. I go back and log throughout my day how I've spent my time, not just what I scheduled. So it's not about I got to schedule and pack all these things, but how did I actually spend my time? And so if I watch 3 hours of Netflix on Saturday, I go log it on my calendar. And I just have a second calendar on my Gmail where I do this. So there's no sophisticated system. And what the purpose of this, and this is everything, taking a shower, sleeping, everything is in 15-minute increments. And it might sound like, okay, that's crazy OCD. So I'm not saying everyone should do 15, but you might find 30 or 60-minute increments, a helpful tool. But what its purpose is are you spending your time budget similar to your money budget, doing the thing or accomplishing the things you say are valuable to you? Or are you like kind of procrastinating or doing these other things that are like stealing your joy or stealing, kind of you from your destination? So that's the first thing is I really try to be cognizant. Am I spending my time intentionally? And then the second thing I do is this concept of remembered happiness versus experienced happiness. And this is a psychological concept that says, let's say like someone has a new child. If you go talk to, a couple with a newborn in the moment, they're probably sleep deprived. They're learning new things. They're like, don't break the baby. Like there's so many things where you're just trying to like be a good human and you're stressed out. If you talk to that same couple 10 years later, they likely will recall those as very fond times in their life, right? There's like, oh, that was so, like we stayed up, but it was so great. I wouldn't trade it for the world. And there's nothing wrong with that remembered happiness. However, experienced happiness is when you feel that it's happy in the moment, right? Not that you think about it later. And so for my professional take, I have a very simple rule. Am I spending my minutes right? And at the end of a day, do I feel like I had experienced happiness? And as soon as either one of those gets out of whack, I know I'm doing the wrong thing. I have the wrong job. I'm hanging around the wrong people.
Yeah, I love that. So, I mean, anybody, again, if you're listening to me, then and this podcast, you've heard me say a lot of this stuff before. One of the things I harp on all the time is if you're a W-2 employee, you absolutely are worth more outside than in. Now, that doesn't mean that you're happier outside than in, or that you have the mental fortitude to make sure you're worth more than outside than in. I'm just saying that they are getting more off of your labor, more income, more value than leverage. They're compensating you for. That's all. Like, and some people, if they went to try and do it on their own because they don't have the mental fortitude to do it, they are worth more to themselves and their family in than out. So it's like, 100%. Doesn't mean that you just got to be clear about where you're at. So that's huge. The other thing is, as you said, tracking your time. Something that I've really found helpful is when you ask somebody to spend money or spend time or spend something, spend has kind of connotation to it where I'm losing something. I'm lost. So I would say anytime you feel like you're spending time rather than investing time, you probably are. It's a good indication. Hey, am I getting a return on this emotion, on this time? And so as you're doing your log, I've done the log where I've just like put down what I've done. But after I did that for a few months, I said, well, what would be a more effective way to do this? Now I'm just logging facts, which facts are important. You got to have the facts. You can go back and call on them. But also don't just log the facts of what you did, but log the facts of what you did. How did you feel while you were doing it? Did you not like it? Did you like it? Did it make you, again, I love that you're tying it back to this remembered happiness, experienced happiness. Maybe it's what's happening in those minutes is none of those things. Maybe it's just pain, suffering, anxiety, and so it's not actually helping any of those things. And so being aware of it, the first step to change is awareness. You have to you have to be willing to identify where you are and where you want to go before you can chart a course to get there.
Yeah, I was going to add, also, so much of this comes down to our personal values and motivations. I've worked with people who love being in meetings and all the interaction that comes with that. I detest recurring scheduled work meetings. Like they're just not my thing. I can talk with an individual or a group brainstorming, like unstructured, almost like all day. But as soon as you get me in some type of structured review, or I have to hang out what I used to call the no police, the general counsel and the attorneys and the finance people, like all of those meetings, they're just so draining. I get zero experienced happiness, right? And so I've just found like, don't put myself in that situation. Again, it's not a good or bad thing. Somebody else might be energized by those things. And so I think that's number one. The other piece, just underscoring this idea that, you got to figure out if you're built for it. I think, again, some people really they're running away from maybe what is a bad job or a bad manager, a bad team. And they're like, entrepreneurship will be my answer. And potentially, maybe you just need to have more rigor and structure on how you hire your next manager versus thinking entrepreneurship will be the solution. And again, I look at all of these as toolkits on our broader life map. Because, for me, it's about getting to that end destination. I look at it in 6 beats. You got to become more valuable. You got to build new relationships. That's going to allow you to generate income. From there, hopefully you're growing the gap, staying liquid. That's going to let you acquire assets. And then that's going to be the unlock for you to stay free. And staying free might be spend more time with friends and family. It might be, bettering your health. It might be starting a business without investors. It might be, philanthropy or volunteerism. Like there's all sorts of things you could go and do, but you got to figure out where you want to go. And I think for most folks, it's not, I want to retire or I want to be rich. They want the agency to be free. And our definition of how we want to spend that freedom can be different, but we likely can take a shared path on how we get there.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree that. And so thank you for walking through this, because I think it's been like your frameworks that you're sharing with people: customer discovery, customer validation, customer creation, and then customer company building, scaling. All of those are all part of the process, both with your customers, both with your the people that you are enlisting into your vision. And that goes for anything, whether it's in a family, business, religion, relationship, every aspect of your life. I love the idea of having a personal constitution, having these guidelines that you say, look, this is who I am. We have ours is probably, it's definitely longer than 3 words or 6 words, but it's a who am I statement that we read with our kids. And it's a mixture of like a lot of values that I love, some Boy Scout stuff in there. Cause a lot of who I am came from memorizing these things. I'm like, okay, I leave the world better than I found it. Okay. So that's something that lives inside of me and informs my decisions. Okay. Mm-hmm. I'm kind to people. I
love it.
It informs my decisions. So these things, they constantly are informing who I am. And then one of my, I don't know if you ever heard this one, but it's apparently, I wasn't a Spartan, so I don't know, but they said that this was the Spartans' creed, which is those who sweat more in practice or in training, bleed less in war. And for me, that's important. Like if you're worried about getting demolished in an area, it's because you didn't prepare well. Like just prepare better. It's not that you can't, as you came up with the guitar example, it's that, did you prepare well enough to be successful?
There it is.
And if you didn't, don't blame somebody else. Look inward and say, how can I prepare better next time to accomplish a similar feat that I was trying to accomplish before? And then continue to iterate what your goal is, and don't be scared to have it field tested. Like that was something I wrote down as well. Like your ideas and your life and how you're living your life is being beta tested, not just by yourself, but by other people. There's plenty of examples out there. You can go look and say, hey, how's that set of habits working out for that guy? Nope. Mm-hmm. How's that set of habits working out for that guy? Nope. How's it working out for them? And you can go through and there's plenty of data out there. You don't have to reinvent the wheel or reinvent the funnel to try and find out if your funnel is going to work. There's been thousands of funnels that have been created, and there's been a few that really work. Why spend time trying to find another one that doesn't work? Like Bingo. I love Thomas Edison, but once he found out how to do a light bulb, there was no point in finding out why all the other thousands didn't work.
Yep, exactly.
Just use the one that works.
Exactly. So that's the magic. That's the unlock. I mean, ultimately, and I think this is the punchline for this conversation, you got to know where you want to go. I believe you can use frameworks to help you make better decisions. And then, as you pull it all together, keep leveraging the lessons of others so you don't have to pay the same, kind of investment tax to use that part of your journey. And that's just going to let you move much more quickly, right? I'll leave with this. A lot of times I think folks look to coaches to help them out. I'm a big believer that coaches and mentors and sponsors, paid or unpaid, are a huge unlock. For folks who are trying to figure out how to get started on that path, I would say go find, folks who have 20, 30 years of experience that they've condensed into a book that has lasted, because you are now going to get 20 years of their experience in 8 hours of reading and $20 of investment. And it's going to be one of the best coaching, coaches that you can hire. And then once you've kind of consumed enough of those, you're going to figure out how do you go find somebody in real life today to go help you move to the next portion of your journey.
Yep, absolutely. Hey, well, thank you so much, LeSean, for hopping on here. If somebody did want to access you for any reason, whether they want just to explore more of your mind, figure out how you can help them, maybe they have a proposal for you, what would be the best way to get a hold of you?
Yeah, if someone's looking to for investment or anything related to what we've talked about, you can hit our group email. It's grow@cagr.com. And if you just want to hang out or just give me a shout, you can reach me directly on Twitter at LaSean.
Awesome. Hey, well, thanks so much. And we'll catch you guys next time on the Fuel Your Legacy Show.
Thanks for joining us. If what you heard today resonates with you, please like, comment, and share on social media. Tag me. And if you do give me a shout out, I'll give you a shout out on the next episode. Thanks to all of those who've left a review. It helps spread the message of what it takes to build a legacy that lasts. And we'll catch you next time on Fuel Your Legacy.